So in reality, what ends up happening is that you are either tamaso-rajasic or rajaso-sattvic or sattva-tamasic. Any of these qualities kind of blend in. But there's a problem, is that you do not want to veer at any given point in your life towards one direction very, very strongly. If you are extremely rajasic, there is a problem. They call that state rajaso-rajasic, tamaso-tamasic, or sattva-sattvic. That's where things start kind of creating a strong imbalance. I'm going to pause there for a second and see if curiosity brings out any questions.
Can you have all three at the same time?
That is the idea. That is the idea, is to always be aware of that. So when you're practicing yoga, what you're trying to do is oftentimes strengthen your consciousness. And when you're conscious, you're observing at every single moment what is it that you are doing. And once you start observing what is it that you're doing, all you have to do, this is so simple, all you have to do is ask if you're doing that based on your likes or dislikes. If you're doing something based on your likes or dislikes and shifting your direction in one way, then it is time for you to get into the rajasic status, hone in on that, and change. Whatever it is that you don't feel like you are naturally veering to, you have to build the muscles in that area. The natural question is why? What's the point? Because when you have an imbalance, when you have a strong affinity or aversion to something or another, what you have created is a lens, a colored lens through which you are seeing the world. And this wall behind me may look pink to me, and I would be willing to die by it. It may look red to somebody else, and he or she may be willing to die by it. And it may look something completely magenta to somebody else, and he or she may be willing to die by it. Right? At the end of the day, we can sit here and argue all we want to. We're simply expressing our imbalanced, not strong, not unified opinions. Does that make sense? So, what yoga wants to do at the end of the day is to take you down a path where you can cultivate an awareness about yourself that is absolutely not colored, absolutely balanced. Does that make sense? Okay. So whenever you feel that you have an urge or a tendency, you can step back and understand why it is that you are doing what you are doing. If you don't like to travel much, ask yourself the question why. If you like to travel much, ask yourself why. If you like to get up at 6 a.m. and come to the 6:30 a.m. yoga class, ask yourself why. And the list keeps on going. You may have some perceptions. I say this all the time. People have strong perceptions. They're like, oh yes, I'm going to move into a tiny house. That is my lifestyle. Because I want to save the environment. Because I want to do good. You have to ask yourself the question, what is the underlying motivation as a result of which you are wanting to do good? Because doing good, just like colored lenses, can be biased. I talk about this in our teacher training program quite a bit, is that we in the West, we in the East, we in certain parts, certain communities, certain countries, have this understanding of what is universal good. Just like you have an understanding of what the color of this wall is. Hence, I see that there are people who want to dedicate their life, dedicate their time to figure out, this kind of hung up, dedicate their life or their time to figure out what is good. So I've seen many folks who want to help reduce warfare in certain parts of Africa, or poverty in certain parts of Africa. And at that point in time, you have to ask, why is it that you want to do that you feel your innate tendency to be? Most of the time, what ends up happening is that it is a result of your past lives' tendencies. It is a result of your past lives' tendencies. How do you know that? You know that by virtue of the fact that the same household can have twin kids and they will turn out to be absolutely different. More often than not, that is the case. So if we were a product of our immediate experiences, and these two kids were born at the exact same time, went through the same parenting, went through the same feeding, went through the same school, wore some of the same clothes, how come their tendencies in the later part of their life become so different? So Gunas creates tendencies, but more important than that, our tendencies lean us towards certain Gunas or not. In order to understand who you are, you have to gain absolute clarity. And that absolute clarity cannot come from the outside. You cannot ask your neighbors, tell me what my tendencies are, and they will be able to tell you. That will not happen. You have to ask yourself. And for that, you have to become very quiet. You have to become so quiet that there is no fluctuation. Because the moment you introduce fluctuation in your mind, that creates colors, that creates colorations. Every vibration has a frequency. Every frequency has certain properties. So the moment you are creating vibrations, you are going to a state where your mind is not looking at the truest self of who you are. So the yogic systems, whether it is koshas or understanding your koshas, or karma and understanding your karmic path, or dharmas and understanding your dharmic path, is all meant to come to one point and one point only. And that is, how is it that you can cast away all these tendencies, likes and dislikes, colorations, vibrations that allow you not to see who you are. So who are you? It is very simple. You are no different than universal consciousness. And the more crazy that idea sounds to you, the more colored your lens is. I'm sorry to be the bearer of the good news. That also means that once you are so close to what it is that you now know not to be, it is easy to cast away those shells. It is easy to cast away those gunas. It is easy to focus in on your tendencies and see how you can start shifting them. Thoughts, questions, comments, anything that comes to mind that is reinforcing or contradictory, it does not matter. Only the people who ask them. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Thoughts, comments? Yes?
I can understand the differences that you described between the tamasic and rajasic and why both can be necessary. The sattvic, it seems like an ideal, and yet you're explaining how it's a piece of a whole. And I'm just wondering where being in that state too much could somehow manifest itself negatively.
Which state?
Society.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. You get so attached, you get so biased to a sattvic state that you fail to look and appreciate anything else that may be around. Yes, absolutely. Generally speaking again, I have noticed that people who get too gung-ho about the sattvic state bury themselves in their self-ego. They feel so much more elevated that they don't want to come down from that state. And by not coming down from that state and holding themselves in such a thin slice of regimental routine, they are living in a world of absolutely maddeningly illusionary state. They are absolutely tamasic. Just because they are wearing a white dhoti and wrapping themselves around it does not make anybody sattvic. It is not a state of presence. It is a state of the mind. It is not a state of demonstration. Similarly, Rajasic state can be very, very destructive. And it's easy to spot them. People who are constantly changing their looks and appearances. Today I have a beard, next day I have a goatee, I gotta shave everything off, I gotta shave one side of my head, I gotta dye this purple, I gotta wear a ring, I gotta have a tattoo, I gotta have a bigger tattoo, I gotta wear shorts today, I gotta wear a giant shorts today. That is an absolutely sickening level of Rajasic state, and you have to create balance. Besides psychiatric visits, that person needs a lot of yoga and a lot of